Welcome to Nigeria Going Beyond Oil. I am Wole Famirewa. The concept of tax amnesty is one that has been used in many parts of the world to encourage defaulting taxpayers to come forward to settle their debts to the government. On today's program, we focus on how Nigeria's Federal Inland Revenue Service is applying this as part of a broader strategy to raise tax revenues. A sharp drop in oil revenues in the last 2 years brought to the fore Nigeria's historic under-reliance on tax revenues. With petrodollars fueling the economy, Nigeria failed to expand the tax base, while millions of citizens and companies have held back trillions of naira owed the government.
The tax base for Nigeria is very, very small. So whether you're talking about individuals, you only have about 10 million out of about 80 million working force. If you're talking about VAT, compliance rate is 12%, 88% of people are not even registered or they are not paying. If you're talking about corporate income tax, it's around 9% compliance rate. So the truth of the matter is, part of why we are in economic crisis today is because of our attitude towards taxation, both as taxpayers as well as government.
We've had a situation in Nigeria where a lot of people and also corporate organizations have been left out of the tax net. And of course, those monies that should have been used to pay as taxes have in most cases been used either to reinvest in the business or spent on other items.
With many companies failing to pay taxes to the Federal Inland Revenue Service, the agency recently opened up an opportunity for defaulting companies to settle debts owed the government. The process, which has been used in many countries across the world, has been described as tax amnesty. It's an opportunity for taxpayers to pay a defined amount in exchange for forgiveness of a tax liability relating to a previous tax period and without fear of criminal prosecution.
You get to a point where you have to face the reality. And the reality is there are loads of people, millions, and even companies, hundreds of thousands, that haven't been paying taxes for so many years. On one hand, you can insist and say, let's beat all of them up and you must pay your taxes. In fact, not only pay your taxes, you pay with penalty, you pay with interest. Here's what's going to happen. You give them a bill that is more than the net worth of the company. So it will be impossible to pay. There is this guy who was sent by his dad to the UK to study. When he finished his education, he stayed there and he started working. But they have a family business back home in Nigeria. So the dad was getting old. He convinced this young man to come back home and take over the business. So the guy came with his mindset from the UK, realized that he hadn't paid taxes, told daddy it was bad not to pay tax, it's a legal obligation, civic After speaking out the grammar, he got a consulting firm. Reviewed the exposure for me. The statute of limitation is how long the taxman can go back. So let's do 6 years. When they finished quantifying the exposure, it was more than the net worth of the company. And the guy said, I want to do the right thing, but the right thing doesn't make sense. So he's afraid of going forward to the taxman.
I believe that once you relax those conditions and let them understand that, listen, we're not here to kill the business. We're not here to stop you from continuing on in business, because if so much cash goes out at once, it will certainly hamper the business. So we're simply saying, come in, declare your taxes or your financials, and we'll waive the interest and penalty for 3 years. And we'll also give you the option to pay on instrumental basis the taxes due to government.
We had always recommended that Nigerians should introduce what is called a tax amnesty, like a tax pardon to the tax defaulters, because it's a way of getting some additional revenue. Because the revenue that ordinarily you will not know that is out there, they will not come out voluntarily to take advantage of that window. It's a window that usually opens once in a while, and when it closes, it may not open maybe another 5 years.
The tax amnesty thing is what we've longed to see. If I reflect back, I remember there have been series of engagements with the FIRS, even on individual company levels, saying, look, the issue of penalty and interest, cash flow problem, economic situation, that if we can get some leeway to be able to pay the principal rather than having to be burdened with the pay. Because at times you find that some of these penalties are even so huge that once companies pay that, their cash flow is eroded. So those are some of the challenges, and coming at this time is even a good time. The economic situation is already affecting businesses. People are laying off staff.
The time allotted for this program is definite, is specific. It's for the years 2013 to 2015, which means tax defaulting pre-2013 and post-2015, they are clearly excluded. And that is how it is done generally in the countries that have introduced tax amnesty. Countries like Russia, whereby generated, I think, about 80 billion, I think they generated about 80 billion euro from that program when it happened in Italy. Russia has done it, USA has done it. Even Ghana, our next door neighbor, they introduced amnesty in 2012. And so far, all the countries that have introduced tax amnesty, I haven't seen anyone that has not been able to generate additional income.
At the National Tax Policy Committee that the Minister of Finance inaugurated a couple of months ago, I'm a member of that committee. This was one of the things we recommended, tax amnesty.
Is this strategy an adoption of any models from any other part of the world?
It's not new. It's been done in Europe, it's done in the States. Recently, I think about a few years ago, it was done in South Africa. So it's not so much an issue of copying, it's just a way that when you want to restart things and make sure that they run on the proper basis, that you forget the sins of the past and then you move forward.
Tax professionals explain why the deal is a good idea.
Doing business is a big problem, and if you now tell a taxpayer that don't worry, you just pay the face value, whatever penalty and interest, which could be almost like ×2 of your liability, will probably be waived aside for you. You get to see that sigh of relief from the taxpayer, and they would willing to come, unless maybe there are some uncertainties, which is around the period.
Ignorantly or intentionally, many companies have failed to follow the tax rules and are now liable to pay a series of penalties that place a huge burden on these businesses going forward.
There's a flat penalty for companies' income tax, 10% penalty. Interest at the current, where now it's the CBN minimum rediscount rate. It used to be lending rate of 21%. But with the amendment of the law in 2007, the rate was reversed downwards. So now FR is using about 15% as the rate for interest. So what it means is there's a deadline for payment. It's stated in the law. There's a deadline for filing. It's just stated in the law. If you breach that deadline, you'll be penalized. It's just to force you to comply. Now, the penalty is a fixed sum. It's a fixed rate. The interest is what now builds up and makes everybody to be scared. VAT is worse. You have VAT, and then say you are penalized for VAT. If you don't file return, there's penalty. If you don't make payment for VAT, there's penalty. If you don't invoice for VAT, there's penalty. VAT is very, very punitive.
The relief that the FIRS offer brings to many companies already struggling with the impact of a recession is a major reason why many have applauded the move. I asked Tunde Fowler, Executive Chairman of the FIRS, to list the sectors of the economy that needed the amnesty deal the most.
The issue about taxation is that it has to be fair. So this applies to everybody. And when I say everybody, every corporate organization. This has to do with federal taxes. State taxes are not included. So if you look at areas that have under-remitted or have been non-compliant of recent, the aviation sector has been very poor. The financial institutions, even some multinationals, surprisingly, have also defaulted.
In terms of size, because we're not talking about just any company. We're looking at the multinationals. They're also considering this option, because I have 1 or 2 friends who work in the multinationals, and they're also saying, look, we're also looking at this and seeing in which area does it affect us. It may not be that significant if you look at your compliance level, but at least the fact that you can make some savings on the penalty and interest side is worth exploring that opportunity. Yesterday, I was speaking to someone in aviation. She was saying, look, they're looking at this because the aviation industry too is facing a lot of challenges. But if we see this, then say what they had to do their own, they look at their position, and they have actually been looking forward to something like this to help them to get out of the issues that they're having.
It's time for an ad break, but when we come back, we'll continue to look at the offer to taxpayers to come clean and pay what they owe Nigeria's government. I'll also show you how the FIRS deal helps companies deal with the recession and could boost government revenues now and long into the future. It is thought that a wide variety of companies owed the Nigerian government trillions of naira in unpaid taxes and associated penalties. However, many business owners are not even aware that they are breaking the law, and others already dealing with a tough economic recession don't have the funds to pay what they know they owe. A tax pardon should make it easier for many companies to move forward and wade through the difficult environment.
I think the manufacturers, they are likely to take advantage of this window because, and the manufacturers, there is no manufacturing company that will not use power. And the fact that there is no power and people are spending a lot of money on providing generator to run their businesses. So because of this, a lot of companies, they are closing up their businesses and shifting to other places like Ghana and other places where, power is more stable. So I think the manufacturing sector, they will likely appreciate this very well because the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, they've always been complaining on so many things that does not make business to thrive for them. And the ease of doing business in Nigeria is not all that comfortable. Manufacturers are not comfortable with that. The other area I can talk about is in the textile industries. I think textile industries, so they have a lot of problem because of a lot of materials, textiles that are imported into Nigeria. So the textiles that are being, manufactured in Nigeria or produced in Nigeria, they are suffering from this kind of problem and they are owing taxes. Even before I retired from the service, there was a time that nearly all the companies in textile industries, they had a lot of back taxes that they owed. And I remember the management of FRS that time decided to give them something like tax amnesty. It wasn't a pronounced amnesty as the one that is being done under Fowler. I think management, they considered whether they should ask them to not to pay certain part, to write off part of the taxes, because when we conducted an exercise on all the textile companies in the north, we discovered that all of them, they were going through one kind of problem, something similar. So I think the textile and the manufacturing companies, those are the main two companies I can quickly think of as I'm here. There may be more, not only those two, but I think those two companies, those two sectors, they will quickly take advantage of this. The agriculture may not, because already the agriculture, companies in agriculture, they already enjoy low rate of taxes and there are other incentives that they enjoy. Those in solid minerals, they too, they enjoy that types of tax incentives.
Tax relief is required by a variety of companies, ranging from small businesses to some of the largest in the country. Titilai Afowoko, tax manager at the Dangote Group, explains the value of the tax amnesty program to the group.
I think the issue of amnesty affects almost all companies. For instance, in my company, for Dangote, for instance, we are there and we saw the opportunity. We looked at our books, see areas that we think we can make use of the amnesty, and we tried to put our position together because it's a general thing for everybody. So we'd like to try to put our position together and approach the tax authorities because it's an opportunity open to all. There's no distinction. It's not that you are big or you're small, but it's just saying as long as you're a taxpayer. So what we basically do is to look at all the companies across board. What do we have? What are your positions? Are there likely assessments? What are the assessments? Put them together. Which periods are we talking about? Do we qualify? Do all those assessments. Come up with a position and say, look, let's get our tax consultant to go and talk to the FIRS on our behalf, because everybody is making use of it. So, and I think with that, you get most big companies. I spoke to some of my friends in other companies too, and they are also exploring, big companies, they're also exploring that opportunity, because it's some savings in terms of when you're able to make use of. Even the 3 years could be huge savings, depending on what we're talking about.
Tunde Fowler, the head of the FIRS, confirms that many companies have come forward to take advantage of the amnesty.
Yes, we have a few people that have already come to the table, started making their returns. We just simply said, make a payment of at least 25% in good faith. And I think that's reasonable. And we'll spread out the balance on terms acceptable both to the Revenue Board and to the taxpayer.
However, not everyone thinks the tax amnesty offer is perfect. Some analysts and tax professionals query the timing of the offer and other details.
First, we don't have sufficient advance notice. The notice was published in the newspapers the day it became effective, and we only have 45 days. Now, when it comes to tax matters, these issues are never straightforward. You need time to make an assessment, to do a review. You may even need to engage a consultant to do it. You go through the whole process together. Some people will have to walk through their internal procedures for approval of the amount. You need to watch your cash flow. Now, I've estimated I'm owing 10 billion. Does it mean I have 10 billion in my bank account? Maybe not. So the time is too short. And in fact, the period covered, in my view, is also too limiting. So it covers 2013 to 15. The question is, if I come forward today and I say, FRS, here am I. I've sinned in the past. I don't want to sin anymore. 2013 to 2014, I think I'm owing 1 million and I want to pay. The taxman will say, so how about 12, 11, 10? Because I don't know what they're going to say, I'll still be afraid to go forward. I would have thought that what we'll say is, all taxes owing in the past, up until now, please come forward and waive the penalty and interest. You need to categorize your taxpayers based on their size, regardless of sectors. You have micro businesses. These are guys who don't even know how much money they are making. They are not keeping any records. They're just trying to survive one day after the other. Some of them, they're the only employee. The owner is the employee, CEO, and everything. You have small businesses. You have medium businesses. You have large corporations. Now, you should not allow large corporations to get away with not doing the right thing, because on one hand, they have the capacity, they have the knowledge. So it wasn't that they were ignorant. They could hire accountants, they could hire lawyers. Why didn't they do it? So you shouldn't create an incentive for them to get away with not paying taxes. But if you look at the rest of the cluster, so there's some merit in trying to embrace them and make them come forward. I actually think that for the micro businesses and the small businesses, you should forgive them of not only the penalty and interest, but also the principal tax. Because on one hand, government is also guilty. How come government did not go to those taxpayers for so many years? In many countries, they do audits almost every year, and they have risk-based analysis to determine who is likely to be the potential evader.
Tunde Fowler responds to some of the criticisms of the plan.
If you have not been paying taxes, you certainly know you've not been paying taxes. And in your mind, you do have an idea of what your profit is. You have an idea of what kind of level of tax you should be paying. You receive VAT from consumers. You must have a way of accounting for it. And so when we say we give you 45 days, maybe we're giving you the first 15 days to really think about it. They are what you call tax morality. How many people would really feel justified living on the sweat of others? And when I say the sweat, those who are paying taxes, funding government, providing, and government provides security, provides a conducive environment for the business, and you sit down, you don't pay your taxes, you don't remit the VAT collected, and then you benefit from that system. So let's assume they take the first 15 days to think about it. They have more than 4 weeks or 30 days to come forward with a self-assessment and with a plan for repayment. So I think the period, quite frankly, is even more than adequate. Now, when it comes to the issue of that, we should forgive only the medium or the small-scale businesses, or we should not forgive the larger organizations. Well, you see, the thing is that the large organizations are remitting, but they're not remitting the correct amount. So we're saying that even if you're not remitting the correct amount, come forward. We will not charge you interest and penalty on the outstanding amount. And what we are doing is that we're carrying out audits. So eventually, we'll get there, we'll audit those organizations, we'll find out what they've been hiding, and we'll charge interest and penalty on those amounts. Now, if you look at it from a financial point of view, it is better for government to get 100 naira today than to wait for another year by the time we have finished the audit and say, okay, you've underpaid government by 100 naira. At the same time, it's to the benefit of the taxpayer. The economy, as they say, is soft. We don't want to disrupt business. And so it's a win-win situation for both sides.
However, even critics acknowledge the potential near-term and long-term benefits of the amnesty deal to the government.
If we do it well, a tax amnesty should be able to raise a region of 1 to 2 trillion naira easily for us. Because even me, I've been talking to a number of taxpayers, including large corporations who have a lot to pay, and they're scared of what's going to happen. So if we embrace them, and if you just raise the tax compliance rates by another 10%, that's you're going to be talking about trillions, 2, 3, 4 trillion naira. And the good thing about amnesty is when you raise that money, then it means that your tax base has expanded by that amount, almost, such that subsequently, exactly, those who can't run away again because you now know them and you have their data. There's always a starting point. And the starting point is to say, what can we do differently? And my view on it is always to say, let's start by profiling taxpayers. With this amnesty program, you capture data from people and profile them. So you won't just come forward and say, I'm owing 10 naira, here's my 10 naira, collect it. Thank you for forgiving the interest and penalty. No, I'm going to ask so many questions about you. Which sector you operate in, your turnover for the past 5 years, how many number of employees do you have? Do you have related parties within Nigeria? Do you have abroad? Are you a group of companies? What I want to do is profile you very well. When I get enough data about you, what I'm going to do subsequently when I want to do the crackdown is I will establish industry standards. So if somebody was doing telecommunication and I take their turnover, what percentage of it should be VAT? I'll allow the system to do it for me. If somebody is within range, instead of 5, they have 4.5, I'll let them be. But if somebody is at 2%, I need to go to them first. So what you then do is you reduce the population that you need to audit. And you focus only on the high-risk taxpayers who are most likely to evade tax. And that helps with your capacity. At the same time, there's so much unemployment in Nigeria. Employ people, employ accountants, employ lawyers, train them. They will do the audit. And it's money worth investing because for every 1 naira you invest like that, you make multiples in tax revenue. And so it's good for the system to build capacity, to get people to comply with tax. But I think this interview will not be complete if we don't say that even government too must spend the tax revenue judiciously for the purpose of the people who pay those taxes.
While companies try to take advantage of the plan, the FIRS are quick to remind defaulting taxpayers about what is likely to follow the grace period provided by the amnesty deal.
What will certainly follow is that more enforcement will be done. We'll carry out more audits, tax audits, and we're certain that we will get the required money that government needs to serve all of us. Some people might be prosecuted because when you collect VAT from a consumer, you're collecting it on behalf of government. So if you don't remit that VAT, it is theft. So we're not even talking about tax on profit. We're talking about money you received on behalf of government. And we should realize that the revenue that is collected by the federal Inland Revenue Service is shared between 3 tiers of government, between the federal government, state governments, and the local government. So if we don't get all these taxpayers to pay in, it doesn't only affect the federal government, it affects the state, affects the local government, affects all of us.
As we conclude the program, it's interesting to note that millions of Nigerian companies, from small businesses to large corporations, don't pay any taxes. And this reflects a sense of entitlement that has followed the prosperity linked to petrodollars in the country. The oil cash has now declined in a dramatic fashion, and the Nigerian taxpayer must now appreciate that paying taxes is a civil responsibility that makes it easier for the government to provide a more conducive and secure atmosphere for business. The existing culture of no payment simply has to change if the country's economy must move forward. However, as noted in this program, the government must also deliver on its responsibility to provide the infrastructure and other amenities needed by the citizens. The FIRS hopes that the offer to forgive taxpayers' penalties owed for not submitting or not making proper tax returns will be taken seriously by smart business owners and help put the country's economy back on track. And recently, the FIRS executive chairman hinted at an event in Lagos that it will extend the deadline for small businesses to come forward to take advantage of the tax pardon up to the end of this year. More good news for those who need to come clean. Thank you very much for watching Nigeria Going Beyond Oil. From me, Wale Famrewa, it's goodbye.